Over in the UK, a scandal is brewing related to transgender youth after a 23-year-old biological female who transitioned to male now identifies as female and is taking legal action against the NHS, which is the UK Health Service, due to, well, essentially not challenging her enough when she was questioning her identity. It seems that in many cases, I'm not saying all, I'm not trying to go after every single community, but I think it's important to point out there are many cases where there's a separate underlying issue where people lack self-esteem and think this might be the issue. This might be the reason why they don't feel good about themselves or they hate themselves or hate their bodies. You then get a health service or clinics that are a bit overzealous and want to promote this, or they have a confirmation bias, and you'll end up with young women like this individual here. Now, I absolutely say young woman, even though you can see she has facial hair. And it's because she identifies as female and regrets the transition and is filing a legal action over this. Too often, the stories we hear are positive, and those can be good things. But the issue is there needs to be sane balance. If there's real people who are critical of what these clinics are doing, it's important to know the stories. Because of social media campaigns to get people banned for bigotry or transphobia, you'll end up only hearing the positive, and that can result in stories like this. In fact, this woman says she went online and she saw all of these issues, and sure enough, now she realizes it was wrong. But when you go online and everyone whispers sweet nothings into your ears, when everyone around you keeps saying positive things because you can't say otherwise you'll get canceled, you'll end up with poor people, with people like this who I have pity. I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I say that, but I empathize, I sympathize. The story says, a 23-year-old woman who is taking legal action against the NHS gender clinic says she should have been challenged more by medical staff over her decision to transition to a male as a teenager. A judge gave the go-ahead for a full hearing of the case against the Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust. Lawyers will argue children cannot give informed consent to treatment, delaying puberty, or helping them to transition. The Tavistock said it always took a cautious approach to treatment. Gender identity charity Mermaids said that people face a long wait for access to such services, that they can save lives, and that very few people regret their decision. The clinic based in Hampstead, northwest London, which runs the UK's only gender identity development service, added that it welcomed an examination of the evidence in this contentious area. I think that's smart, because even if it is rare, even if it's not rare, the point is a review would be a good thing for everybody, and I don't see why anyone would be opposed to it. Now, you have one individual who seems to regret her decisions, and she wants to see a more challenge to young people, and perhaps that's good because it could weed out people who may be misdiagnosed and make sure those who should be diagnosed and treated will actually get their treatment. I think it's a win-win for everybody, right? Cara Bell is one of the claimants and will give evidence in the judicial review, which is likely to be heard in early summer. The second claimant, known only as Mum A, is the mother of a 15-year-old girl with autism who is awaiting treatment at the clinic. Cara describes being a tomboy as a child. When asked how strongly she felt the need to change her gender identity, she replied that it gradually built up as she found out more about transitioning online. Then, as she went down the medical route, she said one step led to another. What she is describing here is akin to, or at least overlapping with, something called rapid onset gender dysphoria. Now, there have been many trans activists who reject the idea that there is peer pressure or a social contagion effect in terms of people thinking they're trans. The social contagion effect is not something I've come up with, and not even a phrase I agree with. It's actually something that's been written about, and that's the phrasing they use. So if you take issue with that, you know what? I kind of agree. I don't like the idea of calling it a contagion. You can call it social pressure or just a social phenomenon, whatever. Look, more importantly, I don't think phrasing matters, but I know a lot of people do. I'm just trying to make sure I do this in a very respectful way, but bring you a story that may be important for those that don't get counter information on the internet. This is a young woman who saw more information online and she regrets it now. That doesn't mean every single person does. It doesn't mean the majority will, but it does show how there is a need to highlight these stories, even just a little bit. Let's move on. She was referred to the Tavistock GIDS clinic at the age of 16. She said after 3 one-hour-long appointments, she was prescribed puberty blockers, which delay the development of signs of puberty, like periods or facial hair. She felt there wasn't enough investigation or therapy before she reached that stage. Quote, I should have been challenged on the proposals or the claims that I was making for myself. And I think that would have made a big difference as well if I was just challenged on the things I was saying. They go on to explain what puberty blockers are. They are drugs that can cause the development of things like breasts, periods, facial hair, and voice breaking. They can pause the development. Pause. They can be prescribed to children with gender dysphoria who feel their sex at birth doesn't match up with their gender. This is meant to give them more time to weigh up their options before they go through the physical changes of puberty. However, puberty blockers do have long-term and permanent effects. A year after starting the puberty blockers, Kira said she was prescribed the male hormone testosterone, which developed male characteristics like facial hair and a deep voice. 3 years ago, she had an operation to remove her breasts. Initially, I felt very relieved and happy about things. But I think as the years go on, you start to feel less and less enthusiastic or even happy about things. You can continue and dig yourself deeper into this hole, or you can choose to come out of it and have the weight lifted off your shoulders. She decided to stop taking cross-sex hormones last year and said she was now accepting of her sex as a female. But she was also angry about what had happened to her in the last decade. Quote, I was allowed to run with this idea that I had, almost like a fantasy as a teenager, and it has affected me in the long run as an adult. I'm very young. I've only just stepped into adulthood, and I have to deal with this kind of burden or radical difference in comparison to others at least. Kira's lawyers will argue that children cannot weigh up the impact such a treatment might have on their future life, including, for instance, on their fertility. Former staff at the clinic have raised concerns that teenagers who want to transition to a different gender are being given puberty blockers without adequate assessment or psychological work. You know, I was told over and over again when I was younger that I would want to do certain things, and I said, that's not true. I know what I want. And of course, I didn't know what I wanted. Young people always say these things. I think it's important to note that young people do sometimes know, but they don't always know, and they can't because they're not old enough and they don't have the life experience. I think it's fair to point out there can be young people who are very smart, and it's important to respect young people when they say they want to try something. Not all the time, but sometimes, because we can't remove all of the obstacles out in front of them and just snowplow everything away. So sometimes kids and young people say dumb things, and you can argue with them, and you can say, you know what, man, here's what I want. Go try what you're saying, stay safe, and then when you figure it out, you'll learn. That's the only way to do it. You can tell someone how to do something over and over again, but for many people, they just have to find out for themselves. And I don't think for this. I think this is an instance of adults just telling you they'll give you whatever you want instead of telling you, hey, sometimes you are wrong about things. Kids don't know everything. And perhaps in this circumstance, this young woman needed someone to push back. Instead, all she got was a bunch of yes men. Yes, you're right. Whatever you want, we'll give you what you need. No questions asked. It's not true for everybody, but it's true for at least her. It has been claimed that children as young as 12 have received the drugs which block the hormones that lead to puberty-related changes. But she also understands why teenagers arrive at the clinic deeply distressed and desperate to change their gender. Quote, I did say the same thing years ago when I went to the clinic. I would say it was saving me from suicidal ideation and depression in general. And at the time, I felt it relieved all of those mental issues I was feeling alongside gender dysphoria. She described her family life as difficult. She also believes that if she had felt more accepted by society as she was then, she might not have wanted to change her gender. She added that she wouldn't have wanted to listen to voices of caution when she was younger. I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to wrap this up by calling out Taylor Swift, of all people. You're probably saying, I don't see what she has to do with this. Well, I'll tell you. She made a music video called The Man, where she sings about how life is so much better for men, and that she would have been so much more successful if she was a man. And perhaps it's because of this persistent lie that many young women feel that life would be easier and better if they were men because the things they want are traditionally masculine. Women can do traditionally masculine things. It's no big deal. Maybe it was a long time ago, but not anymore. You don't need to transition for this. You can just work in construction, be an electrician, work on an oil rig, be a garbage man, whatever you want to do. Taylor Swift is part of this issue, not necessarily related to trans issues, where they're telling young women your life sucks because you're a woman, that men have it so much better. They don't. There's pros and there's cons across the board, and it's impossible to know because most people have never grown up. Well, no one has grown up as both genders. I mean, independently. My experience growing up was as a male, and many people grow up experiencing life as a female. What this woman experienced was growing up female and transitioning. It is unique. What I mean to say is, to do a proper experiment, to know you need controls. You would need to be able to experience both developmental stages, and it's not possible. I mean, I guess not right now. Maybe in the future we'll make some kind of immortality engine and gender swapping engine. I have no idea. The point is, if you tell an entire generation of young women that men have it better and that they can do all of these things, and you show all of these masculine behaviors as only male, don't be surprised when a small percentage say they want to be male. And you'll end up with these young women regretting it. And now she permanently has a beard and a deep voice. And it's not necessarily, I think she obviously understands why she doesn't like it. And I'll leave it there. I'm not saying this as an attack on anybody or anything like that. I'm just trying to make sure that people who are going to make these decisions, they have, a reasonable discussion that includes pros and cons. Nothing in life is perfect, and there is no silver bullet to solve all of your problems. I'll leave it there. Stick around. I got one more segment coming up in a few minutes, and I will see you all shortly.